So, this thing called the federal bureaucracy is a subset of a creature called a bureaucracy. I'm being a little bit political science-y rather than biology-y. Bureaucracy, like life forms, has a certain structure. It has certain tendencies, certain programming, certain nature, and it does certain things well and other things not so well. Now, bureaucracy means literally desk men, as in people sitting at desks doing paperwork. What functions as the circulatory system, as the blood in any bureaucracy, is paperwork. And people can talk all they want about a paperless environment and a paperless office. No, not that. We're not there yet, and we probably never will be. There are times when you need a solid object with somebody's signature, and there are just other things that paper lends itself to. But bureaucracy is a product of the age of the book. In history, there are a variety of ways of separating things out. One way is to have ages like the Metal Ages, not metal, but metal as in the Copper Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. And that deals with the time between the New Stone Age, the Neolithic, and the development of steel. And basically, it's early civilizations up to the Roman Empire. But in terms of intellectual history, you have the age of the spoken word, which is basically everything before we learn how to read and write. We've got the age of writing, which is basically from the time people begin to develop written systems of communication. Then we have the age of the book. And the age of the book really begins with the invention of the printing press and movable type by Johannes Gutenberg around 1450 Anno Domini, around the year 1450 in Europe. The Chinese had block typing before this, but it was words, less efficient, made of wood. Gutenberg's press could mass produce books, and it's the first time in history that anyone could do that. Before that, you needed people either slowly printing, like using Chinese blocks, or you needed monks in monasteries copying books by hand. But with Gutenberg's press, we now have the age of the book, which changes everything. It speeds up communication and is a major cause of both the Protestant Reformation and the Scientific Revolution. A lot of war and a lot of progress was caused by the development of printed books. In the 20th century, you have us moving away from the book to the screen. You have the invention of radio and television, which are passive forms of screen. But really what we are in now is the age of the silicon chip, which is networked computers with which we interact. If you want, pause this video for a moment, and you can see how interactive you can be. Here I'm moving, but if you pause it, it stopped, and then you can unpause it. You should definitely unpause it. Don't just say, oh, he said pause it. No, that's not stop it. It's pause it. But you have control. You can interact with the system. We don't know what this is going to produce. The era of the book destroyed an entire mentality, the mentality of the skald, the medieval bard, who could remember a library of books in his head. It destroyed the need for that. We don't know what the current era is going to be. Bureaucracy is, to a limited degree, a product of the age of writing, where you have scribes who basically serve the function of both lawyers, recorders, and accountants. But bureaucracy really takes off at the time when we start developing more quickly produced books. And its circulatory system is paperwork. What bureaucrats try to do is take as much data as they can and convert it into usable paperwork. Paperwork that can inform policymakers and their decisions. Bureaucracy is the manner in which the instrumentality with which governments rule in the modern era over the last 500 or so years. So the first real bureaucracy comes out of Han Dynasty China around the time of the late Roman Republic and Jesus Christ and up through the Pax Romana of the 1st century AD. The Han Dynasty replaced the first imperial dynasty, the Qin Dynasty, who ruled as brutally, almost, not quite, as the current day communist regime does. The Qin Dynasty was monumentally brutal, and they were also legalists, and they tried ruling through making laws about everything and then killing anyone who broke even the most minor law. And maybe death was certainly not the worst penalty they had. In the 15 and 1600s, Europeans look at China and Japan, and the European leaders say, wow, look at those emperors. They have so much power, and they don't have to negotiate much with people. I want some of that. And when European leaders like King Louis XIV of France try to modernize their governments, they imitate China by importing this bureaucracy system. Now, the Han Dynasty invented it about 2,000 years ago. What you do is you offer anyone, including the children of low-born peasants and high-born nobles and everyone in between, you offer them the opportunity to become government officials, what are called shi, S-H-I-H, shi. It's also Mandarin, and basically what it is a literate scribe or a literati. These mandarins would end up running the country. The emperor reigned, but the mandarins ran things. The emperor trusted the mandarins more than he trusted the nobility or the military, oftentimes. So you could be the son of the most low-born peasant and end up running the country in the emperor's name. The way they selected these people, these shi, these mandarin, these literati, is by examination. And what you had to do is master the philosophy of Kudzu Vine. Kudzu Vine is Confucius, who is the most important philosopher in Eastern civilization up until at least the early 20th century. Kudzu Vine, in many ways, even though he's not a religious figure, he's a philosophical figure, has influence akin to the influence of Jesus Christ on Western civilization, in that just as the Roman Empire Christianizes and our civilization at its heart has the Christian faith, I'll explain that when we cover history, but it's true, the Chinese civilization from the Han Dynasty about 2,200 years ago up through the rise of communism in the 1940s has Confucianism as its primary core idea. The bureaucracy is a meritocracy, and it allows the Chinese to pick the smartest people from their country to rule. It works very well. So when the Europeans imported, the French called them desk men, but these are specialist organizers. They are literate, they are numerate, and they understand laws, and they understand accountancy, and they understand all the things that governments need in order to generate facts and figures, data, information that informs decision makers and that lets everyone know how the decisions worked out, and it also keeps track of who obeys orders and who doesn't. So, there are certain characteristics that bureaucracies have. One of these characteristics is they tend to creep and grow. Creeping bureaucracy is what I mean. In other words, when you establish a bureaucracy, say, to monitor your money, make sure you don't have counterfeiting, and make sure that the right amount of money is in the system. Oddly enough, that's really important. If you have too many dollars in the system at any one time, the value of each dollar deflates. You have what's called inflation, and the price of everything goes through the roof, and your income does not keep up commensurately. So, poverty time. So you start out with the Department of the Treasury to keep track of that. But, well, how do you stop counterfeiters? Well, you need an investigative bureau. So the Secret Service is established under the Department of the Treasury to send police and spies out into the world to find counterfeiters. So they need law enforcement authority across the entire country. So already your Department of the Treasury in addition to running the mint, is now running the Secret Service. What about import and export duties and tariffs? Well, you have a Treasury boat service, which is one of the originators of the Coast Guard, to patrol the harbors and make sure people aren't smuggling in goods or out goods. And then what about electronic money? What about electronic security? Today, money is in the form of digital bits of information in a database somewhere. So the Department of the Treasury's authority has expanded every year since the foundation of the Republic in order to do the job of basically maintaining the money supply with integrity and making sure that we have a good monetary system. All bureaucracies do this. All bureaucracies grow like a kudzu vine, which, if you know anything about the American South, is a blighting disaster. This is a super vine, an absolutely nasty, invasive species that some moron brought into this country decades ago. And kudzu grow several inches per day. Okay, and they end up with vines as thick as my arm or thicker. These things can destroy forests, grasslands, any number of things, and keeping them in check is a full-time job. Bureaucracies are like that. Some bright idea person says, hey, I've got a bright idea. If we're not doing this right now, which means it's out of control, so we've got to expand our powers in order to do this new thing because it bears some relationship to our mission. Bureaucracies like kudzu vines tend to grow and choke out all other things. Because what bureaucracies do is they produce regulations. And regulations are supposed to make everything special and safe and efficient and rational and normal. What regulations really do is they kill initiative. Somebody gets a creative idea, instead of going out and making it happen like the free market is supposed to, what happens is people end up saying, no, you can't do that because of this, that, the other thing. You know, children have been have been arrested for running lemonade stands because they don't match the health and food regulations of whatever town they happen to live in. That's crazy, but it happens, and that gives you, in essence, the nature and the problems of bureaucracy. Bureaucracies do efficiently and effectively run things for the government, but they tend to grow out of control unless they're burned back from time to time, and they tend to constrict initiative and replace it with regulation that ends up being oppressive. It was bureaucratic controls that led to the taxation crisis, which brought about the American Revolution in the first place. Next time, we'll talk more about bureaucracy.